It seems that monkeypox is now a thing that is drawing the attention of the media and people outside of the media as well, because it seems to be spreading outside of Central and Western Africa, which is where it is normally to be found. And it's very intriguing that when you start to look into it, it seems that Bill Gates seems to have immense predictive powers, because he was involved in some things predicting that such an outbreak might occur last year. Before we go any further, I'd just like to draw your attention to a recent article, well, from a few months ago, that Josh and I collaborated on. It was DeepThink number 3, called Do Antitrust and Competition Laws Prevent Monopolies? Now, this was taking a deep dive into economic principles of whether the government can actually prevent the buildup of monopolies or whether they actually help them. Spoiler alert, they only help to create monopolies. But this is all important primarily because Bill Gates is only in the position that he is at right now, primarily because the government back in 2000 or 1999, I think, threw a massive antitrust lawsuit at Microsoft. And wouldn't you know, it was only after that lawsuit that went through and got them told off for their monopolistic practices that Bill Gates started throwing thousands of millions of dollars into lobbying the US government. So if you want to learn more about that, check that out. We also did a contemplations on monopolies as well, so you can check either of those out for a bit more context. Let's get into it.
It's a bit of a racket though, isn't it? I mean, in Britain, the story I've heard is that the government basically went to Bill Gates or to Microsoft and asked them what British children need to learn in IT.
I would not be surprised.
To be prepared for the future. And Microsoft thought very hard about it and came back and said they need to learn how to use Microsoft products.
Oh, what a surprise, eh? And I'll just say, despite what the traditional knowledge would have people assume, it turns out that big government is the biggest boon imaginable for big business and big corporate interests, which is why it should be stopped at all costs. Anyway, let's get on to it. So monkeypox has been found in the UK. It's been found in East Yorkshire, and I'll just read through a little bit of this BBC article. So they have been detected in East Yorkshire. Public health officials have said across the UK there have been 71 confirmed cases of the rare little-known disease. Zoe Stevens from East Riding Public Health said it was inevitable that the virus would circulate around the country, which is contradicted a little bit by some of the other information that I've got coming up. And unfortunately, she says, with any of the viruses, people move around the country. We're all jumping in our cars, jumping on trains. So these viruses do get to every area eventually, which is just the nature of them. She also added, what we do need to be concerned about is the fact that this virus has such a long incubation period. So that can be anywhere between 5 to 21 days. So it sounds somewhat alarming, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I will also point out on the alarming note, a lot of the photos that are being used to head monkeypox articles are not actually of monkeypox.
Oh, really?
There are many other pox diseases like smallpox and so on, and things which look very dramatic, obviously, to get your attention and get clicks. But I've seen a number of doctors and spoken to a few who have been quite exasperated at the widespread use of photos of some horrible skin conditions which have nothing to do with monkeypox.
Yes, well, I'm aware that they are sort of conditions like monkeypox and smallpox and other such things are related because they're poxes, but obviously they are going to be different and show different symptoms potentially. And going into it, I'll just carry on.
Yeah.
The UK Health Security Agency said many of the 71 people infected so far have been gay, bisexual, or men who have had sex with men, and it's been asking these groups in particular to be aware of the symptoms. Now,
especially if you're those men who have sex with men but aren't gay or bisexual.
Yes, that might be that might be concerning. But what this is led many people to believe is that this is a sexually transmitted disease, which it isn't. It seems to be mainly transmitted through close contact, and it's just because of the habits of certain subcultures across the UK of people who are much more likely to come into close contact with one another, that this seems to be spreading through these communities, so to speak. They carry on. The virus, which is usually a mild infection, so this is what monkeypox is for everybody, spreads through close contact with scabs on the skin, bedding, and towels used by an infected person, and through their coughs and sneezes. Monkeypox is not a sexually transmitted disease, and experts have stressed the illness does not affect one community more than another, so there should be no stigma, and we know we can always trust the experts. Symptoms include a fever, headache, muscle aches, backache, swollen lymph nodes, chills, and exhaustion. A rash can develop often beginning on the face, then spreading to other parts of the body. The rash changes and goes through different stages, a bit like chickenpox, before finally forming a scab, which later falls off. So, judging by that, doesn't sound terrible, does it? It sounds like a pretty typical fever, except obviously you develop the rash with some scabs and other such things as well. But it doesn't sound like anything to particularly worry about. And under normal circumstances, I wouldn't be worried about it, and I doubt anybody would be worried about it. But it has got a lot of people thinking that given the massive reaction, won't qualify it one way or the other, to COVID-19 that happened from early 2020 onwards, that this might be the kickstart for a new series of lockdowns. And I thought we'd just examine a little bit of that, because the funny thing is that if you go here, we've had monkeypox show up in the UK before. This is an article from June 2021, so last year, and it was just a little one where Matt Hancock announced that monkeypox had arrived in the UK. But you can go back as far, I think, as 2017 at least, possibly 2016 and 2015, to talk about, to see articles talking about how monkeypox had arrived in the UK at numerous times. So it is something that sporadically shows up here. People are worried that, maybe it's more infectious now due to the fact that it seems to be spreading outside of Central and Western Africa at a faster rate than it had previously. But thankfully, even what I would consider to be leftist shill publications, if I'm perfectly honest, like NPR, have actually been recommending caution on this, recommending not everybody panic. They point out here, monkeypox isn't like COVID-19, and that's a good thing. I mean, this is the one time that I think that and that's a good thing fix at the end of it is possibly warranted. But they go on to say monkeypox typically requires very close contact to spread, as the BBC said, most often skin-to-skin contact. The current outbreak has seen some different patterns, particularly that the rash begins in the genital area first and may not spread across the body. And monkeypox and smallpox are both members of the orthopox family of viruses. Smallpox, which once killed hundreds of millions of people every year, was eradicated in 1980. And the smallpox vaccine itself that we've already got is actually already 85% effective against monkeypox, according to the WHO, although that effectiveness wanes over time. So by the sounds of it, by the information they've given there, anybody who's worried about monkeypox should be able to go off and get a smallpox vaccine if they want. There's no need for any greater intervention into people's day-to-day lives or restrictions of people's liberties. We can all just go on as it is. And that's what I'm hoping is going to be the response to that. But shock that I'm not particularly infatuated or trusting of our institutions as they currently stand. Because Peter Sweden has announced that apparently Moderna is already testing a potential monkeypox vaccine, and he asks the question, will we get monkeypox passports? And I don't know where he's got this information from, but he does seem to be generally quite good at finding the cutting edge of a lot of these breaking news. Right. So I don't think there's any reason to not believe him here. And the media has already started, along with the NPR, to do a debunk of a lot of the conspiracy theories that are going around it. And I just thought I'd bring this one up, this Daily Mail article, primarily because the last thing that they debunk is relevant to the rest of the segment, which is that they say that Bill Gates has nothing to do with this. Bill Gates didn't predict that it would happen. He's not got anything to do with this. What he actually did was predict that, was say that there might be a smallpox outbreak. It's nothing to do with monkeypox. He's not telling the future. He's not setting this up. They say now they have wrongly accused him of being a terrorist because he warned of the possibility of a smallpox terror attack in November 2021. Others have called for him to be arrested. Smallpox is genetically similar to monkeypox, but the two viruses are different. Most claims are based on a false pre-existing narratives around the billionaire whose foundation has heavily invested in developing vaccines. That may be true, but as you have examined before, that's not all that Bill Gates is heavily invested in. He
heavily invests in virtually everything.
Yes, you will be damned to find an organization, especially a international organization, from anywhere in the world that doesn't have Bill Gates with his fingers in the pie somewhere.
Hundreds of millions in every developed country, from Japan to France to Britain to the USA to Canada, in all sorts of different fields. Every sector that you can think of, he's in it. So it's almost like deniability by monopoly. By simply having everything, you can't be accused of partiality. It's like, no, I invest in everything equally. Now, of course, he doesn't. These are well chosen And you have to wonder, he can't be sitting there picking all of these stocks himself because there are so many of them. There is clearly a team of people involved in doing this. Who is that team? What motivates them? And so on. There's a story there if someone can get to the bottom of it.
Yes, these are interesting questions to ask. But the primary point is that Bill Gates has a lot of fingers in a lot of different pies across the world, and also the statement that they're making there, which is that, they say that he made a warning against smallpox in November 2021, is not actually what people are referring to when they're saying that Bill Gates predicted this. But before we get further into that, so to just look at this, the thing that's actually worrying me a little bit is that countries like Belgium are already introducing quarantine for people who have got monkeypox. So Belgium has become the first country to introduce a mandatory quarantine for people with monkeypox. Those with symptoms will need to isolate until their sores subside, which is expected to be around 3 weeks. So already we're starting to get the government restrictions in some countries come back. Obviously, this is not the scale of full-on lockdowns.
Yeah, and I must point out that the real crime with the former lockdowns was that it was essentially quarantining of healthy people, whereas this is quarantining of people who are demonstrably monkeypox cases, not like potential monkeypox cases, not travellers from countries with people who've had monkeypox, but actual monkeypox cases.
This is true. But once again, when the government starts to step in, I become very worried, especially given that Germany has started to mirror this as well. They've started to recommend that people isolate for 21 days, but they have not come in with the official restriction, primarily because if monkeypox is as nasty as these pictures are trying to make it out to be, I wouldn't want to be seen in public looking like that, would you? I think you would be able to trust most people just out of pure shame to not want to go into public, and especially not to rub up against people in public.
I think you
overestimate
while they're at it. The standards of the general population.
I mean, maybe in Germany, but in England, I like to think we're a little bit more proper than that, personally. But let's go on to the actual predictions. So, despite what the Daily Mail has said, the thing that people are referring to is not necessarily that Bill Gates warned against smallpox in 2021 in November. It's more referring to this, which was the NTI paper, the Nuclear Threat Initiative paper, which was done in conjunction with the Munich Security Conference, where they were doing a tabletop fictional exercise scenario to see how they could implement systems that will strengthen, as you can see from the title here, global systems and prevent and respond to high consequence biological threats. As you can imagine, all of their solutions have to do with more international institutions, greater centralization, greater globalization. Bill Gates has shown up a number of times at the World Economic Forum with Klaus Schwab, so we can tell exactly where his agenda is going. But the thing with this is that if we go to the next link, John. Sorry about this, guys. If we just go over to the next link so we can see further down on the page. If we just look at here, you can see a Dr. Chris Elias is involved in this, and he is the president of the Global Development Division of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So once again, interesting how that foundation in particular finds themselves involved in funding literally everything, including the NIH and other such organizations in America. And if we scroll down, whether this is cause for concern or not, it is very interesting how this scenario that they've got here. Attack, May 15th, 2022. The scenario, monkeypox outbreak in Brinia.
Yeah, so they use fictional countries and a fictional planet for this simulation.
They do use a fictional country for these simulations. But I think for a lot of people, the idea that the timing of this and the actual specification of monkeypox is just a little bit too close for comfort.
It was 1 day out, basically, between this becoming a news story and this report in here, which is very close. But
it is very close. Obviously, not to say that this has actually been released by him or anything, but it does seem very interesting.
Technically, if it's within 1 day, then you have like a 1 in 120 chance of that happening.
That's
from
fair.
One study.
But also the actual designation of monkeypox as well, as being specific. So it's not referring to smallpox. And of course, all of the responses that they want are national responses, effects of early action. They're talking about, like I say, greater globalized institutions. And the prediction when they get to December 1st is that there will be 3.2 billion cases and 271 million deaths, which in this scenario, I don't know what the rest of the parameters of the scenario is, but that seems pretty doom-mongering to me.
Well, that's the thing. This is a scenario. So if you're one of the people at the event, basically you only hear the information as it's coming out. So you don't get to hear, okay, move 2, this is what happened, move 3, this is what happened. You don't know whether the scenario is going to be move 1, okay, and then that subsides, but something else comes in or something like that. So it's designed to keep the players on their toes, basically.
Okay, very interesting. And then if we move along from this, there's all just everything else that Bill Gates has been involved in. For instance, at the most recent World Economic Forum meetup, he had this to say, where he's talking about how in 10 years we'll be able to diagnose an entire population within a month, which is, of course, going to involve massive government overstep and invasions into people's lives.
Exactly,
to be able to
it'll
do
be the
this.
end of privacy, permanent medical surveillance.
Yeah, well, let's just check out the clip of what he says here.
We're lucky. If this had been 10 years ago, some of these vaccine technologies did not exist. If it comes 10 years from now, we should have far, far better diagnostic technology. That is, be able to scale up every country within a month to diagnose their entire population. We should have much better therapeutics, some of which will be pathogen independent. And then, as we do come up with vaccines, we want vaccines that are infection blocking and long duration.
I mean, at the end of the day, for me, whether or not he's doing this all with an altruistic purpose in mind, whether or not it's something that he's wanting to do to try and protect and save the world, I think that is a massive overstep to be able to say, well, I'm going to keep you safe. I'm going to wrap a safety blanket around the world. All you need to do is surrender your freedoms, because that's what these sorts of measures inevitably lead to. Because, I mean, Bill Gates was at the forefront at the beginning of the COVID pandemic saying that we needed mass shutdowns. Who cares about the economy? Very easy for a billionaire to say. Who cares about the economy and livelihoods? We need to protect everybody, because that's the only reason that we can do. He was also very, very clear on his own website, and I've covered this before in a premium content, but I'd like to just draw everybody's attention to it as well. He was very, very clear in a Gates notes, if we go to the next link, where he's talking about the first modern pandemic in COVID-19. This was in April of 2020. Very, very clear that he wanted to change people's behavior. Basically to get everybody compliant, get everybody pliable, so that we're able to get them to behave in the way that we want them to for their own good. He says in here, if people's behavior had not changed, then most of the population would have been infected. By changing behavior, many countries have gotten the infection rate to plateau and start to come down. It is reasonable for people to ask whether the behavior change was necessary. Overwhelmingly, he says, the answer is yes. When people hear that an infectious disease is spreading widely, they change their behavior. There was never a choice to have the strong economy of 2019 and 2020. Government requirements made sure that enough people changed the behavior to get the reproduction rate below 1.0, which is necessary to then have the opportunity to resume some activities. So it's very clear throughout this entire thing, we need to change people's behavior. Whether they know it or not, whether they want it or not, it's what's best for them, because we in the elite class have decided what is best for you, and now it's just a matter of getting you to change to what we want for you.
Yeah, the fact that they used fear as a weapon to do this, causing many, many side effects and a lot of collateral damage, quite frankly, in terms of mental health epidemics and suicides and so on. That just doesn't enter into this analysis. And this is the whole problem with trying to engineer the world to your will. When you have one problem which everyone thinks is important, that's great for engineers, because it means they can immediately remove everything else from the analysis and just focus on optimizing for that one problem. And it's true, you can't, if the parameter you're optimizing for is deaths or infection rates from a particular virus, then you can work wonders to do that, but you're going to cause a lot of collateral damage, as he did.
And as you say, they did massively, because he's even come out recently and said, well, I recognize that the lockdowns caused a lot of issues for children going to school. That time they missed out on at school has led to, I think, I've not seen the figures myself, but I'm aware that it's led to dropping literacy rates, social problems for children who didn't have the opportunity to properly socialize, a whole heap of different problems. And he recently came out in a meeting, John, if you go to the next, thank you, saying it's pretty clear young people don't get sick from the disease very often. And this is Bill Gates saying this, so I don't know what YouTube's guidelines are right now. So, this is Bill Gates' words, not mine. We probably, if we knew what we knew today, we would have shut down schools a lot less than we did during this pandemic. And this is from a man who, at the beginning of the pandemic, after we initially locked down, said there's no way that we are able to open up quicker or else everybody will die, basically, is what he was saying. The reproduction rate of the virus will be so much that it'll devastate the rest of the world. We need to keep everything locked down. Whereas now he's turned around and said, actually, maybe we got a few things wrong, which is impressive to hear from a man who said we need to make sure people ask whether the behavior change is necessary. Yes, overwhelmingly yes. Coming back 2 years later going, actually we may have got a few things wrong. Interesting thing about this as well is that there was initially a clip of it that I was able to find, I saw going around a few weeks ago, that I was going to use for this, but the only link I could ever find linking back to it was this one, the @backtolife_20. And wouldn't you know, that account has been suspended. So I'm no longer able to find that clip just floating around. I'm sure I'd be able to find it if I actually went to the original source, but that account had been suspended, and I don't know why that is. But also, Bill Gates has, of course, said many things about how he wants to... This was the thing that people were referring to where he's talking about smallpox terror. He needs research funds. He always needs research funds. And many people think when they see things like this, that what's happening is that a person like Bill Gates just wants to improve his portfolio. He just wants more money. But the fact of the matter is that when you get to... I think people need to recognize that when people get to a certain level of wealth, when you're already one of the richest men in the world, getting more zeros at the end of your bank balance doesn't really matter as much. People in powerful positions like that, they don't want more money. They want more power. Not necessarily for what they would consider selfish reasons. They might want more power so that they're able to better help the world in their own vision. But that power is a reward unto itself. And the increase and influence and power of global government institutions is a fantastic gateway for people like Bill Gates to be able to exert the influence and mold the world in the vision that he wants. So that's just what I want to bring everybody's attention to.
Absolutely. And I just want to point out that when he says things there like, we wouldn't have shut down schools, part of me does wonder, who is we? Who do you mean? Are you speaking for the American government here?
I mean, he does have massive involvement in a lot of their different institutions, so I would not be surprised.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content on the site, such as the Politics of Four Lions premium video between John and Carl. And if you want to follow what else John's putting out, you can follow him on Getter at John Wheatley on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.